There's a particular stillness that arrives after a lifetime of noise. Not the hollow echo of an empty apartment, it's the stillness of a message thread you stopped scrolling, of plans you stopped making, of names you stopped saving in your phone. You don't notice it at first. You just realize, one Tuesday morning, that you haven't checked your notifications in 3 days, and the world hasn't ended. In fact, yours is just beginning. This is the psychology of disappearing. It didn't happen with a slam door or a dramatic exit speech. It happened in increments. A birthday you didn't acknowledge. An invitation you left on maybe. A phone call you let go to voicemail, then never returned. You became a ghost in your own life, haunting the group chats instead of participating in them. People noticed. Of course they noticed. You've changed, they said, like it was an insult. What they meant was, you stopped making it easy for us. But you were already exhausted from making it easy for everyone else. You had been the calendar keeper, the crisis responder, the emotional dumping ground that never overflowed until the day you cracked, and the people you'd carried for years suddenly had a lot on their plate right now. You remember the exact moment the math stopped working. It was 2:47 a.m. You were falling apart, sending texts that started with, "Sorry to bother you, but," and ended with, "I don't know what to do." You watched the read receipts like a defibrillator monitor, waiting for any sign of life. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was definitive. That was when your nervous system did the calculation your heart had avoided. Every time I've needed someone, I've been alone. Every time they've needed me, I've shown up. The equation was simple. You were the constant. They were the variables. And the result was always the same. So you stopped running the numbers. You stopped showing up to places where your presence was taken but never returned. You stopped performing a version of yourself that was slowly flatlining. This wasn't your first lesson in absence. Your nervous system was built on an earlier education. Maybe it was the parent who praised your independence because it meant they didn't have to show up. You're so mature for your age really meant you don't ask for much, and that works for me. Maybe it was the household where emotions were treated like debts, something to be minimized, hidden, or apologized for. You learned that needing was a character flaw, that wanting support was a bill someone else would resent paying. So you built a system that required no outside investment. You became your own emotional infrastructure. The problem is, infrastructure crumbles when it's never maintained. By the time you were an adult, your blueprint for relationships was drawn in invisible ink, only visible when held up to the light of betrayal, of being too much, of being not enough, of being convenient until you weren't. Now you're fluent in a language most people don't know they're speaking. You can read the subtext of a lull that comes 3 days late. You recognize the architecture of performative care the way someone will check in, just enough to say they tried before the distance becomes your fault, not theirs. You've cataloged the warning signs. The friend whose emergencies always happen during your calm moments, but vanishes during theirs. The way "let's catch up soon" becomes a placeholder for "I have no intention of making time." The pattern where you're the one who remembers their coffee order, their trauma anniversary, their middle name, but they can't recall if you have siblings. You're not paranoid. You're a forensic scientist of your own abandonment. You've collected enough evidence to know that the crime scene is always the same, just with different suspects. So you started editing. Not with announcements or ultimatums, but with precision. You muted. You archived. You stopped initiating the "we should hang out" dance and watched as the music stopped without them noticing. You became unreachable, not as punishment, but as practice. People called it cold. You called it climate control, finally regulating the temperature of your own life. The weird part? It didn't hurt. You expected the hollow ache of loneliness, but what you got was the solid ground of peace. You realized you'd been lonely for years, surrounded by people who only knew how to take up space. Now the only space you occupy is your own. And it's enough. It's more than enough. They'll tell stories about you. Let them. You're not in those stories anymore. You stopped auditioning for roles in other people's narratives. The reliable one, the fixer, the person who never says no. You're not rebuilding walls, you're landscaping boundaries. And yes, after a while, the boundary looks like a fortress. That's what happens when you've only ever known invaders. Maybe one day someone will show up with something real. Maybe not. Either way, you're not waiting. You're not hiding. You're just finally home in the quiet, in the stillness, in the space you cleared by burning down a house where you were the only one paying rent. You're not cold. You're just done freezing for people who refuse to bring a coat. And that stillness you found, it's not empty. It's the first thing that's ever been truly yours.